Welcome to The Air is Free, the podcast that helps you stop gripping what you can't control and start embracing what you can. Join Frida Karsberg and me, Sue Willoughby, as we dive into real conversations about resilience, personal freedom, and finding your center in a chaotic world. Inspired by the Swedish expression Luften är fri, which means the air is free, this show is about letting go, trusting the process, and remembering that some things in life were meant to be free and limitless. So take a deep breath, let go of what's weighing you down, and let's get into it. Hello, lovely listener. So happy to have you back for another episode of The Air is Free. Last week, we did kind of a little impromptu coaching session. I did a little impromptu coaching session with Frida because
So helpful.
How are you feeling this week, Frida?
I feel so much better. It was a huge relief after you coached me actually, and I was able to do the turtle steps I needed to move on. So better energy today for sure.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah, sometimes it feels good to just kind of let it out, right? Like the horses do, like a release, a big, or they roll or they do something else and then they shake it off and then they're good. I really wish it was that easy for us humans to release and let go of things. But sadly, it's not. We need to do a little more work. But that's why being around horses is so great.
I know. Love it.
Today, let's talk about, and this is kind of along the same lines, about we've been talking about energy, and I want to talk a little bit today about boundaries. And boundaries can be both ways of, keeping people or keeping energy or things away from us. And they're not necessarily meant to be walls. They can also be bridges to invite the right people in. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I feel like it's true, but it's not so easy to find that boundary that become a bridge, But I feel like you have to tell me more because it feels like you know more about this topic.
About boundaries? Well, okay. I don't know that I know more than you do, but I will say that I have had in the past a hard time with boundaries. And a lot of that was around putting myself in a position, like not having good boundaries of self. And by that, I mean trying to make sure that everyone else was taken care of before I was taken care of, before I wasn't, taking care of myself. So that to me was, I was not having good boundaries about what I really needed. So that's one way that I look at boundaries. And now, and it's kind of, a couple episodes ago, we talked about, no being a complete sentence. That is a way of having a boundary. When someone, asks you to do something and you say yes out of guilt or out of you want the person to like you or think you're, a good person. And then you end up resenting yourself and kicking yourself around the block and being like, why the hell did I say I was going to do that thing? Right. So that's one form of boundaries. Having healthy boundaries and being able to invite people in, you then set sort of like it's like not an expectation, but you're saying, okay, this is what I'm asking of you if I want you in my life. And that's kind of what I mean about being a bridge rather than just keeping people out or keeping something out. Does that help?
Yeah, I love that. That's a good explanation. I mean, yeah. I'm just trying to think if I've had an issue with that lately or if I worked with someone with that. Yeah,
Have you ever known-
sorry, go ahead.
Have you ever known someone that doesn't have boundaries? In other words, and horses are really good with this, but have you ever had somebody that just doesn't respect your boundaries and because they don't have any of their own? So
Yeah.
they're just like in your face and in your space and just being like, disrupting your energy and all of that. And I've had that before. I'm like, whoa, back, it makes me just want to back away or say, put up my hands and be like, no, stop, But I think there are a lot of people that don't understand their own boundaries or how they're coming across and that their space is invading your space. Is that?
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so like, yes, yes, yes. That happens to me a lot. I don't know if I'm like too open sometimes because Or I don't know. And, there's nothing wrong with, not having bound, everyone can do whatever they want to do. But I get super stressed when people don't have boundaries
Mm.
for themselves and they get up like both like mentally and physically up, too close. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself when that happens. And that happened to me a couple of days back, when someone just invited themselves into my space and couldn't see the signs that I was really trying, just being super nice about it, but like, hey, can you take a step? I didn't say that, but that's what I was trying to send out.
Get
Can you
the
please
fuck
take a
away from me.
Yeah, well, I mean, can you please take a step back? And that didn't happen. So I ended up being just very quiet for a very long time. And then, you know, they moved on.
So was it, I'm just trying to get like, so was the interaction invasive in a, was it, were they like somebody can come in your space in an aggressive way, right? And it's sort of, and it's kind of a negative, aggressive way.
Yeah.
Was it that, or was it just that they were clueless?
They were clueless. And I was doing something else at the time
Mhm.
that I had to, put my energy into. But that person didn't see it, didn't notice anything, and just, kept on like pushing the boundaries, pushing the boundaries.
Oblivious.
Yeah. So that was my reaction. I just kind of like froze. So I was that horse that just like,
I think that's the worst. And I used to encounter that a lot in
uh-huh.
corporate America where somebody just doesn't have anything to do, or they do have stuff to do and they don't want to do it. So they wander around and just freaking talk to everybody and they'll sit on your desk or something. And I'm like, what the hell? Get out.
Mm.
I mean, you don't want to say that because it is a work situation. But at the same time, if you don't say, I'm sorry, you're bugging the crap out of me. I have shit to do, right? You don't have to say those words exactly, but it's hard. I mean, so you let this person invade your space until they ran out of juice and then left. And you were like, what the hell just happened?
Right? Yeah. Energy vampires.
Yeah. What could you have done differently?
I mean, I could set up unhealthy boundaries, faster, I guess. I could just not be too, I don't like to say I shouldn't be nice because, I'm a nice person. I think, yeah, I think just unhealthy boundary that could have become a bridge, I guess, if we were like mutual on that.
Mhm.
But me just freezing and closing didn't help. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Because they didn't get, they clearly A, they weren't getting the message. B, it sounds like they didn't really care one way or the other. So I'm just trying to think of a scenario what you could have done. Could you think of anything that you could have done,
Yeah.
like without being mean, right?
Yeah. I would say, hey, sorry, I have to do this now, so I can't talk to you. I love that you're here and want to chat, but I just really need to finish this thing.
Yeah.
Easy enough. But I
Yeah.
was like,
Why do you think you shut down?
I do that sometimes when I don't know what to do. It's such a bad thing to have on your resume, but that's what I do sometimes.
So during a job interview, you're like, what is it? What is it? One of the bad things that you do? I shut down. Okay. So
Yeah.
you just told me that you could have very politely said, hey, I love that you came over to chat and I really want to talk to you about this thing, but I don't have time right now. I'm on a deadline. I've got to finish this, blah, 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 whatever it
Yeah.
is. Could we put a pin in it and talk
Yeah.
about it later? You could have easily done that.
Yeah, but I think also like I think I'm invisible sometimes when I'm working. Like I'm just sitting in my, doing my thing and I'm like I don't think anyone would ever like approach me right now because I'm so like non-approachable, unapproachable or whatever the
Really,
word
you
is.
weren't. You
Yeah,
were
I
very,
felt like, whoa, come and talk to me.
but
Like
here's
I guess I was caught off guard. I think that's I didn't see it coming.
well, and that's a great point because you clearly thought or felt that you were, hey, I have my work face on. I'm involved in what I'm doing persona on,
Mm.
or it's going to be obvious that I'm working on something and nobody's going to bother me.
Mm.
However, here comes Ding Dong along that is clueless and doesn't care what you're doing or didn't even pay attention to the fact that you were heads down working on something. So that person has some issues with their boundaries.
Yeah, yeah, that is
Yes.
true.
Yes. Um,
Have you ever had anything with boundaries that you can share?
kind of a big question. Have
I
you
know.
ever had
You know me. I
anything with
love big questions.
boundaries?
Take a pic.
No, not at all. Yes, I have. I think horses are really good at helping people with boundaries. I've had clients where the horse will come up to them. But sometimes people want to lead the horses rather than just have the horses at liberty.
Hmm.
But the horses can be very in your face, right? They can push your boundaries for sure. So for example, I had a client who the horse was being very close to them and like in a pushy way, like nibbling on their jacket or kind of like, pushing them with their head, making contact with them. They weren't kicking or biting or anything. They were just kind of, clearly physically touching the person. And I asked the person, how does that make you feel? And they said, oh, it's not bad. It's really cute. I don't mind it at all. Well, it kept going on, right? And the horses got pushier and pushier to the point where I could tell that the person was having some issues with that. And I asked them, I said, well, how does it feel now? And they said, not so great. And I said, well, why not? They said, well, they're really in my space and they're really, it makes me a little uncomfortable. And I said, okay, it was okay before, but now it's not. And he said, well, it really wasn't okay before. It made me feel uncomfortable then. Okay. Why didn't you say anything? Well, I didn't want to hurt the horse's feelings. Okay, that's interesting. The horse, I won't say the horse doesn't have feelings, but that's not something that the horse was thinking about. So the horse was clearly testing this person and testing their boundaries to see just how far they could push this person, right? So I asked my client, I said, well, does this come up for you? When does this come up for you in the real world, not in here with the horse? And they kind of basically said all the time. I always feel like I don't have boundaries. I'm not really good at setting boundaries. I don't want to offend people. And I mean, so it opened up a whole big can of worms by having this horse act as a metaphor for their life where their boundaries are tested all the time. And so we worked on that for the rest of the session. And it was really nice to see how they could physically and energetically set a boundary with the horse. And the horse really appreciated that. The horse was like, okay, I get it. Thank you. Thank you for being clear. Thank you for setting those boundaries with me, because otherwise I was going to get really pushy with you.
But isn't it so funny that horses always like, you can always use them as a metaphor of your everyday life,
Yeah.
Whatever needs to come up in that session always comes up, even though you have another plan. So that's really
Yeah.
cool to hear. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that, Sue.
Yeah, it was fun. It's fun to watch, and that's why horses are so good,
Yeah.
because they will boom, it's kind of like a dog, right? Going up to the one person that hates dogs in the room.
Always.
Hey, don't you love me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Can you come up with an example, either aside from the one that you had for yourself? Have you ever had a horse example with your clients like that?
Yeah, I mean, it happens a lot. I would say, because it's always like a horse. Well, actually, I had I had a horse were almost like nibbling on one of my clients, and I'm like, I would never like enjoy a horse being like very mouthy on my fingers. So I kept on asking, like, are you okay with this? Yeah, I think it was like it's kind of like the same thing that happens. And the first they're like, no, it's fine, and then they realize I can actually, what I love about that though, is like when the client realizes he or she can actually say, no, thank you, and, set a boundary. And that's really cool to watch, because then they can use it over and over again. But just to get to that point where they realize, like, hey, I'm the one who can talk for myself. And when you see that transformation happen, when they actually just asking politely for a boundary and it works, it's like, yes, please.
And I've also seen it work in reverse, where someone will just go up and like hug the horse or touch the horse's face or whatever. And the horse is like, excuse me. And they'll back off or they'll walk away or whatever. And then the person's like, the horse rejected me. And it's kind of like, well, how do you do that to people? And, do you go up and like hug somebody and kiss on them and touch them all over? Buy them dinner first, at least, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, they think, oh, it's this big horse. I just want to hug it. I want to be near it. And the horse will come to you. But like you said, it's get permission.
Yeah.
Whatever the permission is, whether it's, and it's the same thing with people. That person that you were referring to that could have come up to you and said, "Are you busy right now?"
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so that could have been their invitation or their permission, asking for your permission to interact with you. And that would have then given you the opportunity to say, "You know what? I'm really busy right now." Instead, they just crashed in and put their arms around you and started touching you. Not physically, but you know what I mean.
Yep. I know.
So it can go both ways. I mean, I think the permission
Yeah.
goes both ways. And by asking permission, that's what builds the bridge. When you don't ask permission, it can encourage someone to put up a wall.
Yeah. And it's interesting to take that take on it too. Like, what am I doing here? Am I overstepping boundaries? Or is it, because it's so easy to say, like, he did this and she did that and I'm perfect. And, but it's also interesting to just like, was it me or was it them?
Yeah. And I don't think that it's either. It's no one's. It's all about having some awareness, self-awareness, and awareness of others to be at least aware enough to say, "Frida, are you busy right now?" "Yes, I am." "Okay, I'll come back another time." Right?
That sounds so nice to my ears.
It's right. It's pleasant, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I want. More pleasantry in my life.
Well, there's nothing wrong with it,
Yeah.
Yes. So I think just having awareness around how we are approaching situations or people, what vibe are they giving off? So if we approach someone and they back off, like you said, you need it, if I need to go all the way on the other side of the room to get away from you, then that's not a good indication. So awareness of self, awareness of the other person's reaction, or animal's reaction. If it's a horse, if it's a dog, if it's you don't go up to a strange dog and stick your fingers in its mouth because it's going to bite you, right?
Yeah. You don't know. Yeah.
What else? So I'm going to stick with, let's start with awareness.
I think
How are you approaching the situation?
Yes, I think awareness is a good word for this. And, just be playful and explore. There's like, I guess there's some rules, but no rules. You just have to feel your way instead of just deciding beforehand and just go for the goal, see what happens in between. Right?
Yeah. And be present.
Yeah.
Be aware, be present, and be respectful.
Yes, yes, and yes.
All right. Well, that was a good lesson on boundaries. So the next time you encounter this person or anybody else, what are you going to do, Frida?
I'm going to say, "Excuse me." And then I'm going to tell them how I feel about this whole situation. I promise.
Back off.
No, I would never.
No, you wouldn't. You're too nice. But at the same time, it's not about being nice or not being nice. It's about understanding what you need, what your boundaries are, and what you feel comfortable with. And it's not that you don't want to talk to that person, just not right now.
Right? Yeah. Later.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Good stuff, Frida. Thank you once again for bringing up a lovely example.
I'm full of examples.
You're full of it, all right. Okay, there you go. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I hope everyone is having a good life out there, and we're so happy that you're listening and subscribing and telling people about our podcast. Thank you so much.
Yes, ditto to that. And if there's a topic that you would like us to cover, please comment on the podcast or reach out to us on one of our Instagrams, and we will see if we can cover that topic. Also, if you feel like being coached live on the show, we would love to have you.
Yes.
So once again, reach out and we'll do that. All right. Until next week, just remember that the air is free.
Luften är fri in Swedish.
Thank you, Frida. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate you. We know you have an option of things to listen to. So thanks for listening to us.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good week.
Thank you. Bye.
That's it for today's episode of The Air is Free. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about, something to let go of, and maybe even a little more space to breathe. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button, rate and review the podcast because it helps more people find us and join in the conversation. And if something resonated with you, share it on social media and be sure to tag us. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can follow us on Instagram, hit us up on our websites. Just come, say hi, send us a message, or let us know what topics you'd love to hear more about. Until next time, take a deep breath, let go of what you can't control, and remember, Luften er fri.